Take a network break. I'm Drew Conry Murray.
And I'm Tom Hollingsworth.
Help yourself to a virtual donut and welcome to a new year of high-speed tech news analysis. John is away this week, so I'm delighted to be joined by Tom Hollingsworth. You may know him as an event lead for the Tech Field Day events or at his Networking Nerd blog or other things. Tom, we're happy to have you. We're going to dive into some news very quickly. But first, if you like Network Break, you're a regular listener, you're looking for other podcasts, we have a ton of stuff now at packetpushers.net. We've got a security show, Packet Protector, and is for networking, which gets into essential beginner networking concepts. So if you or anybody you know needs to brush up, that's a great show. Technical Leadership, that gets into how to advance into and thrive in tech leadership roles. And there are many more. You can find those and everything at packetpushers.net. So let's get into our red alert section. There's a couple of CVEs you should be aware of. First, there's a Perl issue. This is CVE 2025-22376. In Perl, the default nonce is a 32-bit integer generated from the built-in RAND function, which is not cryptographically strong, while the probability of an exploit in the next 30 days is less than 0.01%. This is a base severity of 9.8 as the CVE. The main issue is that Perl uses a pseudo-random number generator in a security context, but the random number generator's algorithm is not cryptographically strong. So we'll have links in the show notes if you think this may be of issue to you. Tom, any comments?
This is a common problem where you're using something that wasn't designed for cryptography to do cryptography seed generation. And the biggest problem is that people can go out and reverse engineer this, because we all know security researchers are very effective at doing things like that. So this is just a quick update to the PRNG to make it a cryptographically secure PRNG, or at least putting one in there that the function calls do. If you've worked with Perl long enough, you know we're just going to need to update. That's fine.
Sticking with high priority CVEs, the security device company Avanti is back in the news, warning of two dangerous CVEs that affect its Connect Secure, Policy Secure, and ZTA gateway products. The first one, which is CVE 2025-0282, has a 9.0 severity. It's a buffer overflow that could allow a remote, unauthenticated attacker to execute code remotely. A 0 day is believed to be already in use against this vulnerability. The second one, CVE 2025-0283, has a 7.0 severity rating, also a buffer overflow. It allows privilege escalation, but you do have to be a local authenticated user, so a little bit more of a barrier compared to the first one. Avanti, frankly, is recommending factory resets in addition to software upgrades for its Connect Secure devices. And then there's some other notes in their release about what to do for Policy Secure and ZTA gateways.
I will add here that Avanti had some problems last year with some CVE stuff, and at least this time they admitted they had a problem and pushed out a patch, and they're going far enough to say, do a reset, make sure that you're up and running. I'm just glad that they're taking the not denial route this year.
I guess that's an improvement.
I'll take what I can get.
Baby steps. All right, let's dive into some news, but still sticking with security. The outgoing head of the U.S. Federal Communications Commission is urging the agency to adopt rules that would let the FCC auction spectrum licenses. The goal is that the proceeds of the auction are going to be used to help U.S. telcos and service providers finish removing Chinese-made networking gear from their networks. Her urgency, of course, is undergirded by the recent revelations of the Salt Typhoon attacks, in which Chinese attackers essentially owned multiple U.S. telco networks. Some background here. In 2021, Congress allocated $1.9 billion to telcos and service providers to remove Huawei and ZTE network gear. Wasn't enough money. So in December 2024, Congress gave the FCC the authorization to borrow another $3.08 billion from the U.S. Treasury to continue the rip and replace operation. The FCC anticipates it will be able to repay that loan via the spectrum auction, thus the urgency. Tom, I haven't actually heard any confirmation that the Chinese attackers relied on Huawei or ZTE gear to perform their exploits. I've only seen reporting that linked the exploits to Cisco routers and unpatched Fortinet gear. Have you heard anything different?
No, I have not. In fact, I had not even heard of any links between Huawei ZTE and what happened with Salt Typhoon. My assumption that I've been working off of for the last 3 months is that they were able to get in and own, non-Chinese gear, which you would expect, right? If you had built backdoors into Huawei and ZTE, which there's no proof that they did, but if you did, you wouldn't want to burn that on this. You'd want to wait for something big, like military conflict or what have you. I've been tracking this, and I think that it's a good idea, because I will say that originally Jessica Rosenworcel only wanted to ensure that the companies had like legit security plans in place. And it was Ron Wyden, a senator from Oregon and my new homeboy, who said, no, 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 you've got to do something about this. You've got to get rid of all of these things. I do like the idea of doing a spectrum auction to kind of recoup some of those costs. I mean, what
Mhm.
do we always joke about? Let's go have a bake sale if we can't afford new equipment. This is the FCC equivalent of a bake sale. But yeah, this has to happen because we even saw this week there were two more regional telcos. Charter Communications was one of them that's affected by Salt Typhoon. And that means, and I quoted this a while back, but to quote Jesse Ventura from Predator, they're dug in like an Alabama tick. They're not getting out. You're going to have to get rid of this equipment. And if I were the telco providers, I would work hand in hand with the vendors to ensure that you have the strongest cryptographic, strongest security protections in place possible before you go to install this equipment. Because if you replace it and they get right back in, you've already gone to the well of replacing the equipment. I don't think you're going to get to go back for a few more years.
Yeah, I guess my larger issue is, yes, it makes certainly political sense and perhaps operational sense to pull out Huawei and ZTE gear. I think most of it is still in like smaller and regional telcos, not the big ones, but there may be some lurking in corners that we're not aware of. I think though it doesn't really actually address the problem, which is, bad US products and poorly operated US products.
I agree. But the other thing too is when you look at what they were targeting, I haven't seen reporting to this effect, but it's my firmly held belief that they were targeting those Kalea nodes that allow law enforcement to just randomly collect data on people. That kind of concentration point speaks to attack surfaces that are way too tempting for people. So I think that that is another thing that we need to revisit. My common chuckle point here is when the FBI tells you to download Signal because they can't confirm that anything else is secure, that
Right.
tells you how freaked out they are.
Yes, absolutely. Because traditionally the FBI has been against end-to-end encryption, at least end-to-end encryption they don't control. But like Signal and WhatsApp let you do end-to-end encryption that presumably gives you some measure of protection against even the FBI, which they don't necessarily prefer. All right, moving on, Verizon says it has demonstrated 5.5 gigabit per second download speeds on a 5G mobile network in a lab environment. The telco says it achieved the speed using virtual RAN equipment from Samsung and a test device using a MediaTek processor. Verizon used a technique called carrier aggregation. And here's a quote from the press release. The companies combined 6 separate channels of sub 6 gigahertz spectrum to achieve the multi-gigabit speed in the downlink, end quote. So this is a laboratory achievement. It does highlight advancements like carrier aggregation across 6 spectrum channels. It still remains, I guess, largely impractical for everyday smartphone use. So this is more about sort of innovation and a lab triumph over maybe immediate real world application.
Yeah, this is one of those weird things because everybody, what's the first thing they're going to say? Oh, well, is this going to make my phone faster? No. Realistically, it's not. This is those the patch notes that say things like squash some bugs and improve performance. That's kind of what this is. It doesn't mean that it's not important later on. And that's one thing that people have to understand about vRAN. This is about software control of RAN functions. I mean, if you look at what happened when we went from 4G LTE to 5G, it was about using more off-the-shelf equipment, right? This was
Yep.
about trying to use x86 servers and other things instead of these custom hack jobs, if you want to call them that. That when they die, right? With software-enabled vRAN, if something dies, I can move the load around a little bit, and then I can go replace that with a box that I just have sitting on the shelf without any kind of specialized knowledge. The problem is this is like Intel's tick-tock chip development thing. I have to build the new thing before I can optimize it to run faster than the old thing did on different hardware. I'm glad that this is working, but I'm also a little worried because vRAN is essentially kind of a competition for ORAN, and the O there stands for open. So I think that the carriers are starting to see that making this software is important, but what they're missing out on is that by making it open source, people can help them develop. They would rather keep that functionality in-house so that they can continue to drive profit out of it in the near term.
Yeah, of course. So one of the key things here isn't necessarily just the faster download speed, the fact that it was achieved on vRAN equipment. And I think maybe Verizon wants to call that out as a maybe signal to all of the vendors it buys from that they are experimenting with vRAN. Because as you say, one of the goals of vRAN is to help the the buyers lower their costs because they can access commercial off-the-shelf technology like an Intel chip instead of a custom chip from Ericsson, Nokia, whoever. I think them signaling we did this with vRAN is also a signal to their providers, hey, we're investigating this technology and looking to bring costs down. Whether it should be open source or not, I don't know, but I think there is some more in this besides just a faster speed. Any other thoughts?
No, I think that we're going to continually see this get built out, and I think it's going to be good for us in the long run. But this is kind of like when they connect, a Wi-Fi signal to the top of the Sears Tower from 110 miles away. Cool story, bro, but how does that help me?
Right. Unless you spend a lot of time up on the Sears Tower. Moving on, Intel has expanded its Core Ultra AI chip lineup with the launch of the Core Ultra 200HX and 200H series, targeting mobile PCs for gamers and graphic designers. The new chips are trying to compete with AMD's Ryzen AI series and Qualcomm's Snapdragon X series, and they feature advanced AI capabilities and improved performance. AI PCs are remaining kind of a premium market segment, certainly, but enterprise adoption may increase as older PCs are replaced, Windows 11 upgrades drive demand, and enterprise software starts to integrate AI features like things like Windows Copilot. So I assume Intel's planning further innovation with their third generation Core Ultra processors, which are expected this year, 2025, to help build out its position in the AI market.
Yeah, this is all about trying to get ahead of that next replacement cycle. Dan Newman, CEO of the Futurum Group, said kind of late last year that he was expecting a super cycle of PC and laptop replacements because of AI. It didn't materialize in 2024, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. In fact, it means that it's just going to get delayed as people start to try to question, do I need these AI functions? Because let's be fair, with all the brouhaha about Copilot recall kind of giving security people hives, and the fact that Apple Intelligence has not really materialized in any real form yet, I think a lot of people are starting to wonder, do I need to buy today, or should I wait for that next revision? Because the other thing we've seen is that companies have really started to get on this yearly or every 18 months chip replacement cycle. And so people now are thinking, well, can I hold on to my laptop a little bit longer if the software still works? And we even saw that with Copilot Plus, because originally it was designed to run on these Snapdragon processors. And then late last year, we saw news that it was going to get backported, if you will, to run on AMD and Intel without those coprocessors. But that doesn't mean that AMD and Intel aren't going to try to put those processors out, because it gives them the ability to offload that onto the system so that they don't have to worry about eating CPU cycles to do AI functions, which is starting to kind of, we're seeing an impact on that with things like storage space and the amount of CPU utilization that's happening. But the other thing is that Intel really has to get in front of AI right now.
Yes, it
With all
does.
of the stuff that happened with Pat Gelsinger, we all kind of know where they're at in this case. And then to see, Jensen Huang get on stage at CES in the shiniest alligator skin jacket I've ever seen in my life. The man, like, what is it? One in every two NVIDIA employees is worth $25 million because of their stock options right now. And Intel's sitting over here thinking, we may not be in business in 3 years. Like, you've got to have a win. And I've said this for several months now. It has to be AI, because the needle's not going to move for anything else. There's not going to be a massive replacement cycle unless people are buying these devices for AI functionality.
Well, I guess that's the question, because if there is a significant price premium on these chips to run AI applications, but enterprises aren't necessarily seeing any business value from AI apps outside of writing emails with ChatGPT, is it worth that spend?
Yeah, and we've talked about this a lot with the fact that GPT is kind of like that first wave. There's more coming as these devices get sent out into the market, and that's one of the things that Jensen Huang talked about at CES was you need more AI stuff. Like, he was trying to sell this personalized AI stack for people's desk, and it's more along the lines of, yeah, we realize there's only so much that we can do with the currently existing hardware. If you want more features, you're going to have to upgrade. And a lot of people are even saying that with Apple. They're like, well, why does it need an M series chip in order to run Apple Intelligence when this chip, which was a year younger, is the exact same speed with almost the exact same specs? And the answer is, you got to cut it off somewhere to get people to buy new stuff. And that was the deciding factor for them.
Yeah, I will say, of course, Jensen Huang is going to say you need more AI because that keeps him in alligator skin jackets. So take that exhortation with a grain of salt. Moving on, the network automation vendor Glueware has been acquired by a private equity firm for an undisclosed amount. The private equity firm is called Quadrilla Capital. And depending on your perception of the private equity industry, this could be a good thing for Glueware or a bad thing. A typical private equity play is known as asset stripping. The PE firm essentially comes in, finds out what they can get for different parts and pieces of the company, sells them off, and then does a spit and polish on what's left and trots it back out for sale to somebody else or back on the public market, usually leaving sort of a hollow shell of the organization. So I talked with Glueware CEO and co-founder Jeff Gray about this. He says Quadrilla is focused on long-term growth and that the company is actually going to provide financial investment in Glueware to help drive that growth. He doesn't anticipate an impact on Glueware staffing or product development. Tom, any thoughts?
I think this is probably a good move for Glueware. I mean, I remember talking to Jeff Gray years and years ago when they were very singularly focused on one market, and they've pivoted, and now they are more of a general network automation and tooling system. But one of the things is that you have to have attach rate, and so I think here what they're talking about with the PE is to be able to kind of build those synergies with other tools, right? It's like, hey, if you're going to buy this platform, why don't you also buy Glueware to do the automation pieces and make it sticky and things like that? If Jeff is optimistic about this, I feel optimistic about it too, because I mean, Glueware is so focused on what they do that I don't necessarily know that how you could split them up and spread those pieces to the winds. Like we see that a lot with larger firms that get bought by PE companies that have like their fingers in multiple different pies, whether it's like networking or security or what have you. It's easy to break those apart. I don't see that happening with Glueware. If anything, I see Glueware getting attached to another piece that this PE firm owns to kind of drive synergistic revenue.
Well, to that end, currently in the portfolio, it's mostly sort of like web analytics and other kind of analytics products in their portfolio. But Jeff Gray said Quadrilla is planning to build a network automation portfolio, and Glueware is an anchor company, and other acquisitions in that automation space may be on the roadmap. And so there may be an opportunity to integrate multiple parts and pieces in the automation space together, I guess, to sort of like enhance the purchase they made and also presumably provide more value to customers buying the product. I will say the long-term goal is some kind of exit, whether that means an IPO or an outright sale to another party is still TBD, but that's the news on Glueware. Moving on to a little bit of space networking. Blue Origin is set to conduct the maiden test flight of its New Glenn rocket as of recording time, which is Friday, January 10th. It's scheduled to launch Sunday, January 12th. So by the time you're hearing this, the launch may or may not have happened, but the launch does aim for this New Glenn rocket to reach orbit and then land the booster offshore in the Atlantic. This is a reusable rocket developed over a decade, and it's designed to compete with SpaceX's Falcon 9. One long-term goal for Blue Origin is to be used to launch satellites for Amazon's Project Kuiper, which is going to compete against Starlink. And according to Reuters, Blue Origin has also booked launch deals with other satellite broadband and satellite-to-cell providers, including Eutelsat, Telesat in Canada, and AST Space Mobile. Reuters says these deals are reportedly worth hundreds of millions of dollars.
I like competition in any market. Let's be honest. And even though this is like the battle of the space billionaires, I think it's important that there is another alternative, right? Because just like we talked about in a previous story with private equity's play is to stamp out all competition in the market and then jack prices through the roof because there's no other viable alternative. Well, now that we have a viable alternative, potentially, there is good opportunity for things like space internet. I mean, what have we seen? We've seen companies like Apple have started using satellite messaging. If you are an outdoors person, you know that there's things like Garmin InReach, which are now adding new functionality to compete with Apple phones. InReach would have never added picture messaging if it hadn't have been for the ability for iPhones to do the same. So now I look at what Musk has been doing with SpaceX and what they're going to be charging for Starlink. And if there is a viable alternative in orbit, thanks to Blue Origin, then that will work better. I do think, though, that one of the reasons why this is such a momentous occasion for everybody is the fact that the way this was done was they built the rocket and they made it work, and then they decided to launch it, as opposed to, oh, let's throw it up in the air and hope that we catch it on the way down kind of stuff. So if you've got that's the traditional Silicon Valley mentality of build it just enough to keep it from falling apart, and in some cases it didn't even do that. It fell apart halfway up. Whereas I think Bezos kind of has that NASA mentality of you better build it right the first time because we don't really get a second chance at this. And I know that a lot of people are excited about this, just because who's not excited about rocket launches? Come on, guys.
Yeah, and also the move fast and break stuff ethos doesn't really work well when you're dealing with hundreds of thousands of pounds of rocket fuel.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that we've seen as Starship has kind of become more, getting closer to this is the possibility of, well, what happens if we accidentally have a rapid unplanned disassembly and we spray rocket fuel everywhere or any of that kind of stuff. I mean, we've even seen issues with wetlands around their launch site. So
Right.
there's a lot of things that go into launching a rocket that are not apparent. Evidently, you have to be really smart to figure that out, almost like a rocket scientist.
Wonder where that came from. Yeah, I agree. I'm glad to see more competition coming to this space. There are lots of use cases for satellite broadband or even, cells to satellite. We're seeing certainly the US government and the military contracting with folks like Starlink for things like naval vessels, where internet communication can be good, both operationally and for the morale of sailors on the ships. So having more competition there makes sense. And also as different company owners experiment with different kinds of politics, you may want some choices in that regard as well. So I guess, good luck to the launch. We'll report back and see what happens because it's happening after we record this episode. Let's wrap with one financial result from TSMC. This is the Taiwanese chip maker. They reported their Q4 financial results for the quarter. The company had revenues of 868 billion new Taiwan dollars, which comes to just over 26 billion in US dollars. That is a revenue jump of 34.4% year over year. And Tom, I'll give you one guess what's driving that growth.
Is it two letters?
It's two letters.
Yeah, this is not a shock to me when you look at the amount of money that companies are making off of AI chips right now. And, obviously NVIDIA makes their own stuff, but where does everybody else go? Because as I've said on our news rundown quite frequently, you can't build a foundry in a year. It's just impossible. And
Mhm.
so the best foundries in the world right now are in Taiwan. And so TSMC is making a killing trying to basically sell people the chips that they need to compete in AI. Now, the question is always going to be, well, how long is this going to last, right?
Yes.
Because okay, we've seen SDN, we've seen ATM lane, we've seen open flow. Like, what's going to happen when the air lets out of this?
Are
And
you comparing AI to OpenFlow? That hurts.
right, but at the same time, when you think about it, it's groundbreaking technology that has a real hard time finding a concrete application right now. I'll give this to AI. At least they can write my term papers for me. I think the problem though is that there's only so much money to go around, and right now it's a lot of speculation. Right, we're going to buy
Yep.
this AI stuff, and we're going to figure out what we can do with it. And if the market for selling that to other people doesn't materialize, then a lot of this is going to kind of go away. And I don't think it's going to hurt TSMC nearly as much as others because TSMC has kind of diversified their load, if you will, because they
Yeah.
don't just make AI chips. They make chips for phones, they make chips for laptops, they make a lot of other stuff. But it could materially impact them if suddenly everybody moves away from that, but also moves away from making new hardware. Because when you go back to the story about Intel, if Intel is currently trying to build new fab facilities in the US so that they can take advantage of CHIPS Act funding, but if they suddenly move away from using AI in their laptops and they pare down what they're doing, you lose out on the revenue for the AI chips, you lose out on the revenue for the actual CPUs. Like, what's going to happen to the market when suddenly people are just building less? And I think that people need to be prepared for that because, it's like the Hemingway quote, what's it like to go bankrupt? And it's like slowly and then suddenly all at once. And I think that's kind of how the AI market fall off is going to happen. It's going to be slow because we're seeing this uptick. And then all at once, nobody's going to care about AI.
Yeah, so we are seeing huge investments in AI infrastructure, but frankly, not a lot of profit being generated by companies who've built that infrastructure and then are trying to turn it into products. So like TSMC's doing well, NVIDIA's doing fantastic, other chip makers, Broadcom and so on are seeing boosts. And folks like Dell and HPE are getting some carry on because people are buying servers with chips to support AI and also routers and switches for AI workloads. But do you, again, lots of infrastructure build out. Not sure we found the killer apps yet. Do you want to venture a guess on how long the AI boom is going to last, or at least the AI infrastructure boom?
Well, I mean, I was thinking about this the other day. We're really only 2 years into the AI revolution, if you want to call it that.
Mhm.
I would give it at least two more, if not three.
Mhm.
Um, the closer we get to 2030, it's going to be you've got to have something right now, right? And we're still kind of playing around with it. Like as revolutionary, and I use the quotey fingers, they're as revolutionary as GPT algorithms are. They're not that really revolutionary when you think about it. I want to see the stuff that AI does as it builds on that, as it learns better how to anticipate things, how to do stuff. But you can't get there without building a product that allows you to train things. And so there's still a lot of runway for that. There's a lot of product that's going to have to be sold before the companies reach a theoretical point where they can't keep up with the explosion of processing power. I mean, when you think about the amount of CPU cycles that are currently being generated to do things like learning models, I mean, it boggles the mind compared to, thinking back to, the first generation of smartphones or things like that. But the way that that feels from there to now is going to be how it's going to feel in 5 years when we're consuming even more cycles and these things have become, ridiculously optimized to generate what they're doing now. I was talking to Corey Dierig from our team, and he said that one of the things that's so amazing is that NVIDIA is actually able to use ray tracing in their GPUs now, not because they were able to build it for gaming, but because the amount of horsepower they had to throw in there to do AI workloads made ray tracing trivial. And that
Hmm.
was like a huge deal for people because like things like ray tracing allow you to put like reflections in a video game without having to hack them together. They
Mhm.
just work. And but now what you're running into is like a new NVIDIA card costs more than the PC you're putting it in because the amount of energy and effort that has to go into what you're doing with it to make it ready to run AI is just kind of comical.
Right. Not to mention all of the resources being consumed by AI data centers in terms of water, power, and so on, and whether that's actually sustainable or scalable remains to be seen. But you're giving it 2 or 3 years, you think we're going to keep seeing NVIDIA and TSMC and so on minting money.
Yeah, I think that they will, at least for then. Then the question becomes the adoption curve, right? I mean, when you think about it, Apple's been trying to roll out Apple Intelligence for realistically 6 months right now, and they don't even have all the features out. And that's probably the most present application of AI, if you don't count things like Stable Diffusion or Chat GPT. And it's like, well, I've got to get it in a place where I can use it and build my workflows around it before I can really start to decide if I can use it and then eventually get tired of it. So, you're thinking on a yearly timeline at this point because as fast as we're doing software revisions, we're still not taking advantage of that. I mean, okay, Apple can summarize my notifications now, and it's not even doing that really well. What's it going to be like in another couple of years when they're building in even more intelligence to like do things in the medical space or things in the financial space?
Right.
You've got to give it time to develop, and development right now is done by people, and people unfortunately do not work as fast as an AI.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see what happens in domain specific areas like finance, medicine, so on, whether we can see some real, actual tangible benefits from AI. I think there are opportunities there. We need to get beyond thinking about sort of ChatGPT and making funny images as sort of the killer use cases, because there is more that could be done.
Yeah, I don't need a slightly faster chatbot that seems a little more human. I need you to solve real
Right.
problems.
I want you to find cancer if I have it in my X-ray.
And I
Exactly.
want you to cure it. I want you to do that finally. Like,
That's
this is the
right.
promise.
Yeah, right. Things like drug design and so on. Yeah, absolutely. Well, that wraps up our news. Tom, where can folks find you online? Where can they get more from you?
Oh, I'm everywhere. Probably the best place to find me right now is techfieldday.com. That's the day job. So I do a lot of events, but we do a lot of things like we have an event coming up at the end of the month that's focused on AI, strangely enough. So you want to tune in for that. Full schedule for the first half of the year is out there. Do some writing on my own on networkingnerd.net. You can also catch me at futurumgroup.com, which is the big overlord company now. We're very happy to be a part of them, and they have a lot of content out there, especially kind of doing analyst work and things like that. So make sure you check them out.
Absolutely, highly recommended. I'm Drew Conry Murray. I'm on Blue Sky at DrewCM. I'm blogging at packetpushers.net. You can also find me on LinkedIn. Thank you for joining us for our inaugural episode for 2025 of Network Break. If you like the show, it'd be great if you could leave a recommendation on Apple Podcasts or just tell somebody about it. And as always, you can send us comments, corrections, kudos, whatever you want at packetpushers.net/FU. The FU is for follow-up, and we do take all follow-up seriously. So please do reach out. As always, thanks for listening.